welcome to this session, and thank you everybody for coming. I think we should probably get started, but before we do, I want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, without whom this event would not happen. So a quick round of applause to our sponsors and a bit of a thank you. So let's start with a bit about me. I'm Sam Wadhwani. I am a Salesforce CTA. There are a lot of acronyms, so bear with me. I'm a Salesforce MVP, and I'm also a community group lead for the London Architect Group in London. I've been in the ecosystem, Salesforce ecosystem, for about 15 years out of 20 consulting and technology. So I've faced my fair share of different ends of the spectrum of challenge, but also lots of different teams, lots of different client problems. Now let's hear a bit about you. Quick show of hands. This is about audience participation. Who here has been on a project where someone has said it should be simple? Good. Well, that means you're in the right session. And it's a fairly quick session. I will get through it quite quickly, but I've left it at least a few minutes, 5 minutes at the end, for any questions as a bit of an ask me anything sort of thing. But it's actually where our story begins, with a message that I saw when checking my emails on a Sunday night. It started with, quick question. We'd like to integrate Salesforce with our new onboarding platform across 8 different countries, real time, with regulatory separation, and in 3 months. It ended with, that should be straightforward, right? And most people, when they imagine the job of a CTA, they picture someone calmly designing elegant architecture with technical details and, above all, drawing pictures, pretty pictures. But the reality is actually frequently quite different. Rather than talking about frameworks today, I'm going to walk you through a typical week for a CTA like me, using a real-life scenario a bit like this one. And the reason I want to focus there is because being a CTA, and I noticed there are some CTAs in the room, female inspirational CTAs at that, it's more about the technical details and systems. As you heard this morning in the keynote, there's a lot more to it. But 2 things that I want to bring out in this is that it's about decisions and it's about judgment. So Monday morning arrives with that email ringing in my head. We start with the usual team stand-up meeting and the question, did you see that email? And I almost die inside. I say, yes, I saw the email with a big sigh. Cue a million questions. How are we going to do this? Are they crazy? What does this involve? Does anyone have any experience? Does anyone know what they want, really? In reality, though, once all those meeting ceremonies are over and out the way, the day actually starts with something that seems quite unproductive at first, and that's thinking. Because from that one original sentence, sorry, bear with me, the CTA starts to form a mental model of what it's made up of. Identity verification services, regional and country regulatory differences, integration with customer and core banking platforms, multiple clouds, as you'd probably expect, and a timeline that assumes that the laws of physics don't apply. So the first skill that we use is problem framing. What does their current landscape look like? Now, this is easier if you've been working on the project for some time. It's actually harder if either you've not been on that project before or this particular scope has been out of scope until now. Or even if you haven't built strong relationships with the other architects that you can lean on. What are the constraints? I once had a client who said, we've homegrown our integration platform, but we need to integrate with this other system that is a mix of on-premise systems, third-party cloud providers, and in sequence, and it needs to perform in under a second. Well, I can't begin to unpack the number of constraints that are part of that one requirement. I could probably do a session just on that, right? So inevitably, the answer to that is, well, some of that is just not possible, or it's very difficult to do without significant cost or significant additional technical build. What else? Do you have a realistic forecast of the volume that you're likely to need? And this one gets forgotten quite a lot of the time. There are great ideas, but actually practically thinking about what is it you're expecting from this solution. Because ultimately, if the load increases or it spikes, how on earth is it going to scale? And then, what issues have you already encountered? Or rather, what do I risk getting called about in the future that I can make a decision about now to avoid? Okay. Of course, experience here helps quite a lot, especially in staying calm. But it means piecing together what you've seen before or is logical or makes sense. It can become a bit like a sixth sense. I see unhappy people, if you will, if you know that reference. And from that experience, it's being able to see the potential integration patterns that are going to affect performance, or the data model approach that's not going to scale, or topically, the combination of platform features that might introduce a security vulnerability, which has happened quite regularly these days. The unique skill of the CTA is in identifying those early so that you can avoid them. Because it's really funny, and I'm sure there's experience here, that when things get into production, they become surprisingly permanent. Or rather, if there's a chance that you are not going to be able to address or prioritize a technical decision in the near future, well, guess what? What you're actually doing is making a very poor strategic choice. I've had that in the past where I've actually said that to a team, and they've gone, "Oh, you've got me there." So Tuesday, then, is focused on assimilating that thinking so that by the end I've held sessions and understood the underlying requirements. I've got a good view of where the snakes and ladders are likely to be. I've documented or at least discussed some of this with the team. I've formulated design decisions that are likely needing to be made with a level of confidence on the recommendations and trade-offs. So I've got a good view of this by now, and I've helped to scope and estimate at a high level with most of the I's dotted and the T's crossed. There was a question this morning in the keynote about estimation. I can answer that later. But by Wednesday, we face a very different challenge. It now becomes less about the technology and more about the people. We've got the business pushing for speed. We've got security concerned about protection. We've got legal and compliance focused on regulation. And we've got our delivery teams who just want to ship something that actually works. So when those tensions arise, the CTA's job is more about communication. And I can't stress this enough. We talked about it in the morning. CTAs have learned how to comprehend a complex scenario and fast, but then to articulate the considerations or solutions in a crisp and concise way. And you'll hear that phrase from a lot of CTAs, crisp and concise. Next time you're trying to explain the why or how in a complex topic, and it's not hitting the mark, I challenge you to stop for a minute and just ask yourself, what are you trying to say? What is the point you're trying to convey? Okay? Forget about the fluff, forget about the preamble, get to the point that means something to them. That gets you to the point of explaining those complex decisions in a way that different audiences can understand without using the phrases like, that's just the way Salesforce works. That doesn't help anyone. But in those tense situations or situations where you've got differing opinions, and that happens a lot, my job is not to win the argument. As a CTA, my job is to help everyone make the best possible decision for the systems overall. And that includes drawing on the deep technical knowledge. It involves combining that with experience in applying it and to provide the assurance to the organization that the delivery will be successful. Architecture and the skill of a CTA, in a way, is the art of finding the least worst compromise. Now, before I go on, hands up, anyone who's already on their CTA journey or who is considering going on their CTA journey. Quick show of hands. Okay, this is to you. Please don't quote me on that last one because it's not official advice. So Thursday arrives and now the real fun begins. Usually there are a number of governance forums to navigate, resulting in lots of anxiety and eye rolls. Governance gets a really, really bad reputation for slowing down the pace. But it's actually there to protect the delivery and make sure that we're not building the wrong things. It's a vehicle that takes a step back and addresses patterns that can be seen so that you're not solving the same challenges again and again and again, or making ownership and choices opaque and less transparent. Okay. And there's usually a spectrum of voices and perspectives in the room, but that's the intention, that we consider the problem holistically and to know within a margin of doubt that it's going to meet the need. I've had these tense situations before, and I can see the temperature rise in the conversation. And what happens there, well, one of my favorite disarming or calming techniques is to actually say, but one option is to do nothing, and then watch as the penny drops amongst the group when they realize that they're all in the same boat trying to solve the same problem. So it's typically about ensuring there's a clear problem statement. I can't remember the number of times I have asked my team or other architects presenting at forums like these, but what's the actual problem statement? What are you actually trying to solve? It's about clearly laying out those considerations for the choice to be measured against, and also identifying the options and their relative trade-offs against the architectural or the design or the operational principles that you've agreed up front. That last one is almost always forgotten. And it's about putting forward a recommendation with a justification of how it meets those measures that we talked about and evidences that thorough level of consideration. So the CTA goes through a lot of preparatory work to drive clear and productive discussions, resulting in decisions that protect the platform and make sure that it works in 3 to 5 years at least. And ideally, prevents meetings that start with, so, Sam, we've got a bit of a problem. The forums are absolutely crucial, but what happens before and after can't go unnoticed. And it involves multiple conversations with stakeholders, SMEs, delivery teams, and other architects to understand those constraints that we talked about, and moreover, set expectations so that there are no surprises. Friday is usually where I use the discussions and decisions to set down the tracks with the team and prepare that delivery engine with some documentation, but mainly design walkthroughs, clarifications, explanations of patterns, and sign-offs. So we're good to go. We've done a lot, but what a week it's been. The weekend comes, and we get some time to rest before Sunday night arrives, and I pick up my phone or my laptop, and I check my calendar for the week, and it's full of architecture reviews, delivery checkpoints, roadmap discussions, and inevitably perhaps another message that starts with, quick question. That's when you remember something important. Being a CTA isn't about knowing every feature or limit or fact on the Salesforce platform. It's useful, of course. It's true that technology evolves constantly, whether it's products, platforms, patterns, approaches, clouds, whatever it is. The thing that really matters through it all, though, is judgment. Oh, sorry. And helping organizations make better decisions in complex situations. That means supporting delivery teams, balancing speed with strategy, and occasionally explaining, quite diplomatically, that simple actually isn't simple at all. So the next time someone says it should be simple, know that that's when the real architectural work for a CTA begins. I'd love to hear if this resonates with you or your projects, and I'd welcome any questions.
I hear the life of a CTA within a consultancy can be quite isolating. You end up as a lone wolf, or that the team, you can't really build a team around you. How do you feel going through that at PwC?
So the question there was, the life of a CTA can be seen as quite isolating, a bit of a lone wolf. How do you sort of navigate that? Well, I will say that where I work, none of the CTAs are on the bench, first of all, but also that the power of our delivery or delivering as a team is that architects talk to each other. They have to talk to each other, and it's about that humility in a way that I don't know all the answers, I don't know all the facts. I need to talk to other people to be able to make a decision, because different perspectives and a diversity of viewpoints is really, really healthy. So yes, okay, the CTA does tend to take on quite a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot of activity, as you can see from what we said. But that doesn't mean that they're alone, okay? They shouldn't be operating in a silo. And I have seen this happen, to your point, have seen this happen. But what you tend to see is that they go into a box, and then the sort of patterns that they apply are very much isolated, which doesn't then give you the breadth of consideration for new ways of working, innovative choices, things like that. So it is difficult, but it's not impossible to navigate. Does that answer your question?
I'm a project manager, yet like most of the activities that you described during your week would be what I'd be doing. I would have thought like an architect would be more on the technical side as opposed to kind of like on the communications and business side, but it seems to be a bit of both.
It is. So your question there was there are actually roles within a delivery team that actually cover some of these tasks and activities. So, but your expectation is that it's a bit more technical. So one thing you heard in the morning session is actually there's lots of different kinds of architect. I think I used the phrase they're like crisps. There's lots of flavors, if you will. And actually, you're absolutely right. Different flavors of architect actually cover different domains, whether it's an integration architect or a data architect or a business architect, which is a very underrepresented and unrecognized role within typical deliveries. And they all focus on different things. A CTA is broad and deep. Okay, so when I think about the shape of those different types of architects, you've got things like enterprise architects who are very broad across the entire landscape, but somewhat, I don't want to say shallow, but they're not as deep in their technical knowledge. You've got domain architects like data architects who are very deep, but also quite narrow at the same time. Solution architects tend to be more conical in shape, where you've got a lot of breadth at the top, but then they might be specialists in some areas. So there are lots of different shapes. What I'm trying to show here, though, is that the technical foundation is just that. The knowledge is the baseline that you've got. What happens on top is applying it, the skill in negotiation and diplomacy and communication, building relationships, navigating those tense situations and coming to a point where you've got a clear answer that's transparent for the business to move forward on. Does that answer your question?
Hi. You mentioned during your talk that Salesforce doesn't work that way, isn't constructive and helpful. And I thought that was really interesting because I'm sure it still pops into your head on a weekly basis, if not more. When you're dealing with a requirement that might be rigid from a user or a stakeholder, how do you steer the conversation into something more constructive?
Yeah. So the question was where you've got a constrained requirement that says it has to be this way, we know that Salesforce works in a particular way for very good reason. Sometimes the approach there is to actually explain, we're not saying Salesforce just works this way, but we're actually offering an understanding to that requirement that there's a reason it works that way, and this is because it's been built based on a lot of industry knowledge or the sort of, 60, 70, 80% of use cases that it's trying to satisfy. Now, that's not necessarily what you want to use out the box if there's a clear enough justification for the benefit that any customization that you're going to do on top to meet that requirement is going to deliver. Okay, so it's not that customization is off the table. It's that the risks and the impacts involved in customizing to the degree to meet that specific rigid requirement are very well understood and accepted by the business. Okay, so I do tend to get into a lot of conversations around, but that means you're going to have to maintain that, and that's cost to you, right? And that generally comes back to, okay, maybe we should be sticking more to the native capabilities that are provided and managed by the platform. Maybe we can be a little bit flexible on the requirement. Does that answer your question? I think that's all we've got time for, so thank you very much for your participation, and see you soon.